Welcome to today's webcast, hosted by the Sales Management Association. Today's session is one in a series of web-based Sales Management Association presentations that feature practitioners and thought leaders in the field of Salesforce effectiveness. The Sales Management Association is a professional association for sales operations and sales management professions. We provide our members with research, case studies, training, peer networking, and professional development. If you're joining us for the first time, we invite you to consider membership in the Sales Management Association and to visit us on the web at salesmanagement.org. I'm Joe Fagans, Marketing Coordinator at Sales Management Association. I'm pleased to introduce this special discussion moderated by Bob Kelly, the Sales Management Association Chairman, with three excellent panelists: Lisa Honecker and Brandon Waits from FedEx Office, and Gopkareen Rao from Mindtickle. Lisa Honecker is Managing Director of the East U.S. region for FedEx Office, where she is responsible for customer acquisition, account development, and account retention strategy. She supports an 80-person sales organization. Brandon Waits is Managing Director, Inclusion, Leadership, and Learning Strategies at FedEx Office. He leads a team of 50 talent development professionals, supporting the development of 15,000 team members at more than 2,100 U.S. locations. Before joining FedEx in 2014, he held senior talent leadership positions in the security, technology, and financial services industries. Gopkareen Rao is Chief Marketing and Strategy Officer at Mindtickle, a sales enablement platform empowering salespeople by equipping them with the knowledge and tangible skills to drive revenue. Prior to joining Mindtickle, Gop was the Senior Vice President of Products and Industries and Vice President of Vertical Markets at Aptus. Thank you, Bob Kelly from Sales Management Association, Lisa Honecker and Brandon Waits from FedEx Office, and Gopkareen Rao from Mindtickle for being with us today. Welcome, Bob, Lisa, Brandon, and Gop.
Our topic today is extending the effectiveness of competency-based learning to capability-driven sales readiness. At FedEx Office, the firm is transforming its approach to sales enablement and readiness by targeting the right skills, process, and tools to take them into the 22nd century. By partnering learning and development with field sales leadership, FedEx Office is evolving its framework to a more measurable, systematic approach to deliver competencies and capabilities that define ongoing success in the field. And that's our topic today. We'll begin with a discussion of some of the learnings experienced at FedEx Office as part of this effort. My first question is, can you explain the way the learning and development and the field sales organization previously worked together? And what were some of the challenges with that approach? Lisa, can we start with you?
Absolutely, Bob. And I think that's a great place to start. I think FedEx Office is not unlike any other organization out there. As companies grow and mature, that tendency to get very siloed based on functions happens more frequently than we would probably all like to admit. In fact, there's a great book out there called The Founder's Mentality, and it talks about exactly that. As companies mature and they get bigger, that willingness and acceptance of looking inside towards your silo tends to be more the norm than the exception. So those chasms between those functional groups tend to grow while that happens, and it's very typical within a field sales organization and a learning and development organization, even though the reality of the success of the field sales organization depends very heavily on the insights and training and development that our learning and development partners can offer us. Now, all that said, salespeople always feel like they're the exception and that nobody understands sales except for salespeople. So you have that working against you as well. If you didn't carry a bag, quote unquote, you may not have the credibility with a sales organization right up off the bat. Sometimes from an L&D perspective, we find that our partners may be out of touch with, well, does this really tie back to revenue? Am I going to be able to drive more revenue and close more deals because of this? that sort of thing. So those disconnects culturally and just sometimes by design tend to happen more often than not.
Brandon, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. When I reflect back and think about the working independently, I would say that learning was available, but probably not present with our field sales. And I think that's a really important distinction. And in order to be successful, I think the learning function has to be present in the places and spaces where our field sales conduct work every day. And without that, what we recognized was there was a disconnect between the effectiveness and the relevancy of our learning programs with the needs of our sales force. What we noticed with that working too independently is that learning really didn't meet the sales in the moment of need or really within their everyday workflow. And we recognized that learning couldn't be this separate thing from sales. It needed to be in tune with the needs and really the realities that our sales force go through. We had to bring all that together. We had to bring the workflow of the sales professional, our education had to be relevant, and our systems had to bring learning to our sales professionals really in the moment of need.
So was there agreement that a more collaborative approach was important? And if so, how did you come to that agreement?
So that is a great question as well, and just kind of a natural thought process of where we're discussing all of these things today. And I would say, again, just by design, functional groups don't tend to automatically say, hey, we need to work together to come up with something better than what we have today. But in undergoing the project that we were all working on in terms of how you opened us and looking to transform our field sales organization, one of the tools in the FedEx toolkit is the foundation of quality-driven management. And when you attack any problem, regardless of what it is, you really start with the methodology that is behind quality-driven management, and that starts with assessing the problem. But you can't assess it in a vacuum if you're going to have any hopes at true lasting success. So our team looked at the problem that we had and we said, you know what, in order to ready our sales organization for the future, we need to take a learning and development partner on this. So as overly simple as it seems, like almost a duh, it was very intentional on our part, saying we can't solve this problem. If we would have solved this problem by ourselves, we would have been able to do that so very long ago. So I reached out to Brandon and I painted him a picture as to what we were looking to do. And then together we worked to build where we are today. One of the things that's really important and kind of a cultural tie that binds, so even though we are sometimes siloed functional areas, at the end of the day, as part of being a FedEx team member, we all live by the purple promise, which is, again, something that ties all of our operating companies together and all of our team members together, which says that we are here to make every customer experience outstanding. And for me as a field sales leader and Brandon as a learning and development leader, obviously his support is all team members, any functional area, field or home office. Mine is the sales organization that I lead. But together, we did have a shared vision in making our team members' experience outstanding. So the combination of let's approach this problem very methodically from a quality-driven management perspective with a cultural tie that binds and a passion to serve and develop our customers, it was very easy for us to come together on this. Now, obviously, sales is a very different profession. That's why the Sales Management Association exists, to try to help herd the cats. So there's multiple different personas in there. There's obviously hard and soft skills that need to be trained, the varying levels of experience and backgrounds that we get when we hire and develop, bring new talent into the organization. There's a lot to corral to make a sales organization sales ready. And Brandon and his team were instrumental in helping us define what a lot of that was.
Brandon, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, soon after Lisa reached out around this effort, I think we quickly realized that, both of us wanted to do better. We wanted a more effective support program for our sales professionals. And we really started by approaching what was in scope here. And we know we needed to address really the full life cycle of the employee. To support the sales organization, we know we needed to attract the right people. And once we got them in the door, we had to prepare them in the right way, and we also had to help develop our existing sales force. The other thing we recognized is it all needed to fit together, that we needed to our learning programs and our support needed to resonate with our sales professionals really from the moment they walked in the door. And so, some things we could agree on were, just sitting in the classroom, it's not going to yield the desired results that we have. We needed to approach learning that and make it, experiential. It needed to include multiple modes of media. And really, we wanted to start delivering learning within the workflow of the sales professional, really get in their headspace and get in the workflow and life of a sales professional.
You've had a perspective from seeing many companies go through similar circumstances. Can you talk a little bit about how this represents kind of a unique challenge?
Yeah, Bob, I love what Lisa and Brandon just shared. 2 points in particular, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because they really did do such a good job of bringing their respective points of view to the table, so as to speak. The first one, and I don't think any of us can really make enough of a fine point of this, is that sales as a profession is such a unique animal. As sales executive management and indeed business partners, what Lisa and Brandon are expected to, you might even argue are required to orchestrate, are multiple things that need to work together in sync. I think that was the powerful point that Lisa really made earlier. These multiple things include multiple personas, multiple complex skills, multiple data points, all operating in multiple settings. And you see a lot of emphasis there on multiple because these really are variables that have to be orchestrated by a large, complex organization like a FedEx. And all this while ensuring that single outcome that aligns with the corporate promise of FedEx, right? Which is engaging customers, maximizing the value of every interaction with the organization. And for me, this is the other sort of fine point that I think Brandon also called out, which means that everyone else, in addition to quota-carrying AEs, are also in the business of sales. Customer service folks, people in the contact center, e-commerce support, technical resources, delivery folks, everyone. In other words, being on message, on task around brand and value positioning is a universal challenge and opportunity. And we see this consistently across the companies we work with, large and small, whether they're global or regional, it doesn't matter. And so our perspective, I think, aligns very nicely with what we heard this afternoon, which is that you simply cannot solve for this challenge with silos of sales training or corporate learning tools, or relying ultimately on that last fail-safe, which is frontline manager intervention. So that's kind of, I think, one key point I would certainly sort of relate in terms of our experiences working with companies on similar trajectories or journeys. And then the second point, I think, is something that Brandon spoke about, which is aligning intent with action. And I think this is, again, a case of where I think Brandon and Lisa have really been on a multi-year journey. What they're doing is really taking that journey to the next level as they continue to look at what tools and technologies can help drive FedEx's journey in terms of enabling sellers and other customer-facing teams. But the point is this: if you accept the premise of what I discussed earlier, which is about sales being a universal function, if you will, then a second challenge looms close, which is that people are now working from anywhere, not just from home. They are digital, they are deskless, and they're data-driven. And so at a time when earnings are under pressure, bottom lines are increasingly under scrutiny, how do you bring people out of the field or their day-to-day jobs to sit in a classroom, whether in person or a virtual classroom, when it's both costly and potentially ineffective? As so many of the well-known phenomena, such as the forgetting curve, start coming into play, with people who are already consumed with way too much multi-threading, multitasking, it becomes critical for organizations to make sure that completion and certification programs and metrics are hypercharged by what technology is making possible. It needs to be experiential, it needs to be problem-based, and when you do that, you can also ensure that it's personal and it's embedded in the flow of work. And I think that's something else that I'm increasingly taking away as we work with a lot of companies that are really looking at sort of figuring out how to bring inline and offline approaches together in service of the kinds of programs that Lisa and Brandon are effectively representing here on behalf of FedEx. So hopefully that provides some color from a technology standpoint.
So how did you evolve your framework for defining competencies and capabilities and make them more effective in the field? Brandon.
Well, Bob, I think that when we think about competencies, we think about it just being an HR or an L&D concept, but really what we had to think about was our competency and capability model. It's really part of this transformational strategy. It's a key component of the transformational strategy that we had. And it's the bringing together of, we examine what are all the soft skills a certain role needs, what are the hard skills that a certain role needs, and really what enables the capability in that sales professional in that role to be ready when they need to be ready. And so, Lisa, I think I'll ask you to share some of the process we went through to identify the right competencies and capabilities per role.
So that, again, is an area where we worked together on, because the viewpoints that Brandon brought to the table were significantly valuable to really segmenting this to where we needed to be. Because as we all know, there is no one salesperson. Even when you look at your sales organization today, you have very tenured sales professionals that have very ingrained ways on how they're going to serve customers and do what they do. But you also have very new sales professionals on your team who really could almost be afraid in front of a customer. And the reason why I say that is because not only are they joining a new company and figuring out where they fit, which goes back to Brandon's point and frankly passion on a world-class onboarding program, but then they can demonstrate a lack of confidence relative to products and services, how to overcome a buyer's objection, all of those sorts of things. So sitting together with Brandon and identifying all those different seller personas, what were their predispositions on various sales approaches, on things they tend to avoid that are necessary in the sales cycle, and how do we deconstruct that so that we give them the tools and the confidence in order to be credible and position our brand and our solution in front of our customers, both current and potential. So really segmenting those down and then aligning those pieces along the buyer's journey were both critical. So it's really matching that seller's journey along with the buyer's journey so that it's almost like a zipper. And as you zip it up, that seller is ready for every step along the buyer's journey. And you cannot do that in one sitting. You cannot do that in a classroom for a week where, as many organizations do, we fly everybody in, and by the time they get to the airport, their knowledge retention is something in the single digits or low double digits, and then by the time they get home, it's definitely in the single digits. So a tremendous amount of expense and time gets invested into an effort in that for a questionable return on investment. So enabling sellers where they are along their own personal development journey, and then matching those competencies needed in order to ensure higher success rates within the buyer's journey was critical to what we were doing. And I think that that ties back to exactly what Brandon talked about in the last question about micro learning and role plays and just consuming that training and that development content when and where you were at. And then the last thing that I want to add to this is we've talked so much about the seller. The sales manager is critical in this. And what we also found in our research is that when you do have a mature or maturing sales organization, the L&D efforts can tend to focus on the individual contributor, but there is a huge opportunity for the sales manager to actually bear that burden, not all of it, obviously, but that coaching element can tend to get shoved to the wayside. But through technology enablers, through solutions that are out there today, it brings the sales manager back into that learning and development, that coaching role, that right there in the moment with the seller, not always on sales calls, but truly shoulder to shoulder, either before or after that sales call, enabled through technology. And Bob, I would just like to add to that. Obviously, there are a ton of technology enablers out there. All anyone needs to do is go to the G2 crowd and they will see what is out there for consideration. And what we found is the technology enablers fell into a couple of buckets. Either they were seller readiness only, they were marketing content only, or they were a hybrid and they had offerings either as a combined offering or a partnership, strategic partnership of the like. What we found is we wanted to separate those and have players in each of those space that could help us enable our shared vision on where we wanted to go, again tying back to the world-class sales organization and delivering the purple promise both to our team members as well as the customers we serve. And so that true readiness platform we certainly found in companies like Mindtickle.
Go. At Mindtickle, you've seen a lot of companies. You work across many industries and many other segments of your client base. Can you discuss any sort of common best practices that you would call out to help companies that are looking to adopt new technologies to support sales readiness?
Yeah, certainly, Bob. I want to start first by saying thank you to you for hosting, what is hopefully a series of conversations on this very important topic. But equally, thanks to Lisa and Brandon for their thought leadership and partnership in this important space, and the level of thought they put into how FedEx Office, approaches this problem of ultimately delivering solutions that you and I benefit from, in our own little individual ways. So there's a lot of gratitude there, I think, from millions of customers across the country, if nothing else, in our business context. Now, having said that, I think, I would say technologies are only as good as far as the business outcomes they drive for the business leaders and business users out of these solutions. So to respond to your question more directly, I would answer in two parts. I think the first thing is, when you're approaching any technology question, start by asking, what is the strategic goal we want? And I think I have a couple of customers that I really see as sort of the North Star in this from this perspective. One customer said, look, we want to improve patient access and better patient outcomes while we follow fair market practices. That is a great North Star to start with. The second one said, we want to improve customer access to consistent product and service quality, no matter where they are in the country. And so this meant that sellers from both companies needed to be invested not just in following good communications and consistent messaging, but good solutioning practices pre, at, and post-sales. And that's a great start because, like we were discussing earlier, it means that not just your salespeople, but your customer service reps, your sales dev people, anyone that is potentially in an interaction with that customer is either a great brand point or a great risk point. And when you do that, you then identify in the context of the solution space we sit in, you're identifying those common competencies and you're designing the system, not just the data, not just people, not just functions, not just process, but that comprehensive and complete system to drive the greatest outcome for the greatest number of your customers. Then the second thing I would say is that, again, when it comes to our space, it's critical to recognize that no two people go through the same training platform or the same training content or the same classroom and come out of the other end behaving and acting the same way, because people are unique. And so while it's important to approach every technology decision from a cost effectiveness perspective or how it is that will deliver at scale, I think what Lisa said was so critical in terms of finding purpose-built solutions that start with that outcome and then sort of maximize the great people, the great content, the great organizations you have available as resources internally. And when you do that, you can make it personal, you can make it personalized, you can make it tailored to both your motivated and your unmotivated learners. And that's where I think the power of having L&D and sales management at the table becomes absolutely key, because it's a combination of push and pull. The third piece is it needs to be continuous. It needs to be a closed loop with a two-way sharing of information, because these people in the field have a pulse of the market and of the customer. And I think that's, again, something that has been so great to hear about today, a couple of times when we talk about the fact that it's not just about the sellers, it's about the frontline managers, it's about other people facing the customers. It's that 360-degree communication about what's working, what's not working, ranging from the onboarding program to the messaging program to the upskilling program that's meant to improve business acumen and financial acumen. So I think those are kind of the key elements that ultimately bring me back to, I think, the point I would make again as the guy who is sitting on top of technology is that tech is best approached as a foundation for a system that integrates your core assets, which is your people, your process, your content, and your data to drive the best outcome for your customers. Ultimately, that's what keeps us in business.
Thank you, Gop, and we'll let you have the last word in those remarks. I want to thank Lisa Honecker and Brandon Waits from FedEx Office and Gop Rao from Mindtickle for being with us today and for being generous with your insights. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
I'm Bob Kelly, Sales Management Association Chairman. Thanks again for your time and attention today. Goodbye until next time.